Hello and welcome. You're tuned in to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. And I got to tell you guys, pretty excited. I just got back from Toronto, Canada. I was there, as I told you, Tim and I have got a lot of cool things kind of popping behind the scenes. Some of it has to do with the paranormal, some of it does not. And that's why we've tapered the shows to Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays through the summer months. We'll be back full strength 5 shows a week in the fall. But right now it's Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We're doing a lot of different projects. And just got back from filming this series about haunted hospitals and telling my story about, and you guys heard it featured here on Theater of the Mind a couple months back. And I'm excited to see how they play it out and the special effects they use, whatever they do to convey my story, hoping it makes it into the final cut, of course. So as soon as I know more about that, hear me now, as soon as I know more about that, I will promote it and post it and let you know when it's on, where it's on, and how you can watch it. I mention that now so you don't have to send me 1,000 emails between now and the airing asking when it's going to be on. Trust me, your old buddy Dave is a self-promoter. I'll let you know when it's going to be on. That's a promise from me to you. All right, great. We've got to get going here. Got a really interesting show today. And through the years, you know, we have so many great authors that reach out to us. And one issue I always have is we get some great novelists that will reach out. And it's really hard to talk to a novelist on a radio show like this, especially at any length, because it's a novel. It's something they've created. It's not real, and you guys want to hear the real stories, the paranormal, strange encounters. So it's always kind of a strange razor's edge, and we've stayed away from novelists for a good part of our career. Once in a while, we've had them on for 5 minutes to kind of do a brief little intro to their novel because it fits in our realm, and I think it's going to be entertaining and people will enjoy it. We're lucky tonight, though. We're joined by author L. Syndey Fisher, and she's got quite a few books out already. She's got a brand new book, The Devil's Board. And her books, although novelizations, are based on real accounts and real paranormal experiences. She's here with us this evening to share some of her stories, some of the stories that inspired her, and we'll just talk in general about the paranormal. Thank you for joining us tonight, Syndey.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm going to put up on our page today, so you can go to darknessradio.com, click on the Killer Deals tab, and you will be able to find the link to buy The Devil's Board. And if you click on her name, you'll be able to find all the other books. But remember, it's all right there for you at darknessradio.com under the Killer Deals link. All of the books and topics that we cover, we try to make sure that if there is something to go along with it, movies, DVDs, documentaries, or books, you can find them all in one concise place. Check it out. We've also got a lot of other cool items, and we always add in new items in that list as well, from ghost hunting to Bigfoot hunting to alien hunting, clothing and accessories. So go check that out. Syndey, talk to me a little bit about your life. Did you have an interest in the paranormal throughout your life, or is this something that's just come on over the last 15, 20 years?
Well, Dave, that is probably the most popular question that is asked of me when I give interviews. And I always tell people, you know, we're not born believing in the paranormal. It's because of something that has happened to you. Usually it is a transforming experience. You know, as adults, we you know, our perceptions of life are based on our experiences. And again, a paranormal experience can be completely transforming for you. So as a child, at around 8 years old, I had my very first paranormal experience while I was a guest in the Lindenwood home. That house is a house that I talked about. It's a very large, beautiful estate that is talked about in The Haunting of Natalie Bradford, my first debut novel. And while I was there, I experienced the ghost of Liz Bradford, who had been murdered by her husband. And so that kind of opened the doorway there to a quest to know what was actually going on. Could this have been just my imagination? And so I ended up at the library during my summer vacations. My mom, the one thing that I always grateful to my mom for is introducing me to the library and getting that very first library card. And so I spent my summer vacations at the library going through the books. And you know, while all the other kids were over reading Dr. Seuss, here I was in the New Age section checking out magic and sorcery and ghost and the paranormal and things like that. And I just couldn't get enough of it. And that has just been, it's like it launched this lifelong experience, or something that I have been engaged in for all of these years. And so it has turned into L. Syndey Fisher as the writer. And I love researching many of these things.
Now, you said that you saw the ghost of this woman that had been murdered. Can you talk me through that? What was that experience like for you?
I had come home from school, and I was with Audrey. And she and I went into the house, into the front door. And as we walked into the front door, the master suite was over to the left, one of the first rooms that you come to. And we walked past, and it immediately caught our eye because, I just glanced into the doorway, and there, wrapped up in a sheet, was the form of a person, and I could see their hair above the sheets kind of sticking out. And it was so bizarre, and it struck me, and I became a little bit frightened, and I stopped and stared, and she and I both were standing there, and I said, is that your mom? And meaning her stepmother, and is who I was referring to at that point. And she says, no, I don't know. And so we both said, hey, is somebody there? And there was nothing. There was no movement or anything. And the house was haunted. We knew that it was haunted. And so you can imagine an 8-year-old child's, thinking and stuff, and how frightened you can become. And we both just, not knowing exactly, was that a ghost that I'm looking at, or was that a dead body, or a person that is still alive but asleep in this house? It's not supposed to be anybody there. So we ran out the front door, and she called her stepmom to come to the home. And the stepmother told her, go across the street to the country store and do not go back into the house. So the door was left open. We kept an eye on the house the entire time. And long story short, when the mother finally got there and arrived, and we all entered back into the home, there was nobody in the bed. The sheets were crumpled up, and they were on the end of the floor. But what is so odd is that so many other times I've been in the home, and the doors would open by themselves. While you're sitting in the living room just watching television, the doorknob would open. You could sit there and just see it. It would open by itself and open, 6 to 10 inches. And so it wasn't the first time that something like that had happened. But when I witnessed that, and then was later shown a picture of Liz Bradford and what she had looked like, even though I had only seen a portion of the body rolled up in this, like a mummy, sleeping. The dark hair matched the length of the body, and the frame, the height as it was described to me. And the reason that I say that it was the ghost of Liz Bradford is because that's what Audrey believed. But she was the youngest of the Bradford children, and this is what she believed. And so she told me certain things about her mom during the time that we lived in that area. And I became very knowledgeable about the family and what had transpired, and why Liz Bradford was in that home to begin with. Why was she still a ghost there?
How does that process for somebody? I mean, when you realize that a tragic murder took place there, and that a soul remains in that venue, how do you process that? What is it like to, in your case, to kind of get this information? And I mean, this was a sip from a fire hose, right? You go there, boom, a ghost, all of this experience, all of this happens, all of this rich history. Was it hard for you to wrap your head around at first?
Well, as a child, it was, because as a child, you're just mesmerized by the whole, did I really see what I think I saw? Could this possibly be real? So there's no answers. There's no one else that, and keep in mind that this happened in Mississippi. We're in the Bible Belt. There are, some thinking is that, no, there's no such thing, or that's not possible. And so you're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense at all, and you really don't have anyone to talk to. That was the case for a long time. Even though amongst the Bradford children, we all believed in exactly what we had seen, or what we had experienced, whether it was doors opening and closing or whatever, or smells and things like that. Or you could even hear voices. It was wild. Timothy even heard voices during his time there. And he heard the voice of Caroline Bradford that had drowned the year before. She was buried across the street with her mom. So on the second floor of this big, huge house, you could look across the road and you could see the headstones of Liz Bradford and her daughter, especially at night when the moon was really bright. So it was really, it sounds so cinematic, but that's the truth. And it had such a cinematic appeal as a kid when you're looking across. But as an adult, to answer your question, now as an adult and how, I got into writing The Haunting of Natalie Bradford and telling the story of it, once I investigated the trial, the murder trial that took place here in Elvis's hometown, Elvis Presley's birthplace of Tupelo, Mississippi. Once I actually investigated the murder trial and all the things that led to this, it's no surprise at all to me that this woman's spirit is still lingering. And the reason it still lingered is because that she wanted some sort of vindication. She wanted somebody to know her story. There were no eyewitnesses to her death when she was murdered. I can't tell you everything. I'll spoil the story for you. But she wanted somebody to know her story. And and that's where Natalie Houston came into play. There is an incredible prophecy that happened in this book. It was just amazing. Natalie Houston ended up being Devin Bradford's operating room nurse the night that he came in and was shot. It was a domestic dispute that happened on the front parking lot of where she was actually working as a waitress for a little while as a server. And she kind of did that. She had been a homemaker for many years, and she had, 6 children. So, but very unhappy with her marriage, and she wanted some way to escape. That was her time to get away. But when you read that book, you will come to realize exactly why the spirit was unrestful. Now, a few years ago, the last time I talked to any family members of the Bradford family, they told me that her spirit was still very much there. Some of the people, though, all the names in the book was changed. They were changed. I'll tell you that to protect the living, because there are a few surviving family members.
Understandable. Now, you've got, about 10 books out there in total?
I do have about 10 books out, yes.
And when you're searching for that right mix, what is it that inspires you about a story to make you want to work on it as a book project?
It has to have some sort of element of the supernatural. I mean, that's what I do. That's what really motivates me and inspires me, or makes me, become totally entranced or enthralled with the subject matter. This happened to me when I was writing my book, See No Evil. It is about a modern day 20th century prophet. And I had just finished up The Haunting of Natalie Bradford, and I was over at a speaking event, book signing, in a small town called Pontotoc, Mississippi. And the librarian approached me after that event was over, and she said, there's something that you may find interesting that you might want to investigate later, and so I said, really, what is it? And she says, well, we had a guy here that was kind of like a modern day prophet in the 20th century. He had this gift, and he could find lost objects and even lost children and that kind of thing. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, Sure. I said, I've got some other writing projects going, but when I get finished to that point, I may give you a call. Well, about 2 years passed, fast forward, and so something kept bothering me. In fact, I was asleep one night and woke up and something said, you need to go back and talk to Regina at the library. You need to ask her about this man, this project. So I did. I've called her like within the next couple of days, and I said, let me come over. I've gotten some things. I've gotten my desk cleared. Let me come over and see what you have. And she said, okay. So I go and I get over here to this place, and I said, if you don't mind, will you bring me the files of whatever that you have, the newspaper clippings and things that you say that you have of this man? And I was expecting, 2 or 3, and I was not expecting this to be really anything, but to satisfy this prompting that I felt at 3:00 in the morning, and to satisfy her for asking me to look into it, I agreed. And so when she came around the corner, she had this huge file. It was at least 4 or 5 inches thick. And I went, oh my goodness. So I sat down, and within 5 minutes, I just flipped through some different things. And I just was absolutely amazed at what I was finding out about this man. If you're very familiar with Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet of Kentucky, then you'll understand why I was absolutely enthralled by Seymour Prater. And I knew within 5 minutes that I absolutely had to look into this. Not only did I have, with that few little minutes that I was sitting there flipping through some articles, not only did I have a modern day prophet with a supernatural ability that was just unbelievable, but I had someone who had been a witness inadvertently to a murder scene that had happened in Carrollton, Mississippi, months before that he had been contacted. So he actually had provided information to a couple of family members. And this is kind of what the book is about, See No Evil. There was a murder that occurred in Carrollton, Mississippi around 10:30 at night on January the 3rd, 1931. A man was brutally murdered in his little store, and there was no eyewitnesses to that crime, but the family members drove to Pontotoc, Mississippi, 2 brothers, and consulted this psychic, this seer, as they called him, and he was renowned all around the Southeast, like Edgar Cayce. Many, many people knew of him and his abilities. So when they drove to see, about 2.5, 3 hours, when they made that drive to Pontotoc, Mississippi to see Seymour Prater, he was able to provide them with some details of Mr. Floyd's murder that they had no way of ever finding out on their own. And so the story is about that. And of course, then there was a town haunting. It's an incredible tale. That is probably one of my favorite projects that I've done so far, although I do love them all. That one was really, really interesting. So I don't want to tell you everything, but that is how that books are born with me. There has to be this element of the supernatural, and there has to be certain things that I look for. And if it really, really deserves to be between the pages of a book, I'm going to do everything I can to research it the way it needs to be researched and get it out there and get that story written.
Has there ever been a case that appears to have a supernatural flair to it, a supernatural backstory, and as you kind of peel back the layers, you find out that all falls apart?
It does, and that's disappointing, to be honest with you. There was a lady who contacted me, and even though there is some basis to this story, and it's really fascinating. In fact, it made national news. Here in the South, in Tupelo, I've always said this is the most unique town ever. There's always something to talk about here. We had a local judge who was threatened by a convicted felon, I believe. This happened years ago, and it was the craziest thing because the guy was trying to get into his home, and they were just trying to get hair out of his hairbrush because they had a voodoo priestess that this man was going to take the judge's hair to, and they were going to cast a spell to kill him. or to reverse the decision so that he could be a free man. And so that was very, very interesting. But the only thing is, it was open and shut. There wasn't, it was like just a minute of happening. So it wasn't like it went on for months or anything really happened significant. And so I was dead in the water on that investigation, but that would have been an incredible story if there had just been a little bit more to it.
Right. And we're always seeking truth. And
yes.
That's why I talk about TrueCar every week on the show, Syndey. See, I got to make these little commercials fit in where we can. Here are some useful and truthful car tips that you may not be aware of. A coffee filter and a little bit of olive oil can clean your interior, and removing excess weight from your car, that'll help improve gas mileage. So you can place your key fob up to your chin to increase its range, right? So when you're looking to open up your car or get that car starter going from a distance, by using your chin, you're becoming an antenna unit for it. I know it's strange, but it's true. Here's another tip you might not be aware of. TrueCar also helps people get used cars. That's right. TrueCar isn't just for buying new cars. With their certified dealer network and nationwide inventory of nearly 1 million used cars, you'll enjoy real pricing on actual inventory and a simpler buying experience, whether you buy new or used. And with TrueCar, users can see what others paid, so they know if they're getting a good deal before buying. They're also more likely to enjoy a faster buying experience by connecting with TrueCar certified dealers. When you're ready to buy a new or used car, check out TrueCar and enjoy a more confident car buying experience. Some features are not available in all states. Syndey Fisher, our guest this evening. And again, we have a link up to her newest book, and you can find that by going to darknessradio.com and clicking on the icon for Killer Deals. You'll find all of the books there that we cover on this show, so it's easier than pie to find them. And once you start ordering off of that link that we supply you through our Killer Deals link, you're helping to support our show as well. When you support our advertisers, you support the show. A small portion of every sale that goes through that Killer Deals link, whether it's one of the books we recommended or one that you find on your own using our link, that goes to help our show and sustain it so that we can continue to bring it to you with as limited commercials as we can and free. So remember to keep checking that out and get the book for yourself. You were talking about kind of fleshing out and finding these stories and investigating what you hope is, a nugget of truth to these supernatural twists. And you just talked about one that kind of fell apart on you. When you get a call or you start to do research, has there ever been one where you think, this sounds too good to be true, and the more information you got, the more explosive it became, and you couldn't find the fatal flaw?
Absolutely. Probably the best example of that is the 2 or 3 years that I spent researching a military-based program, which I'm sure you've heard of and you're very familiar with, Stargate, that went on during actually was birthed around 1975 and continued on for a couple of decades. It was shut down in 1995, November of 1995, by the Clinton administration. But the Phoenix series is a different type book. It is a military themed book, but it's has a supernatural feel to it, of course, because of the military was training psychic spies. It is a fictional story that was inspired by true events, and I did create a character by the name of Seth Phoenix. He is in the Phoenix Mission and the Phoenix Codes. The second book in that series, that was a very intense 2 years. The way I found myself involved in that research, I stumbled across a book called Tell Me What You See by Major Edward Dames. I've always been interested in psychic phenomena. I've studied it since I was able, like I said, to get into the library. I've read everything I could get my hands on. And even especially from around the age 14 or 15 myself, when I started experiencing some strange things or some, if you will, knowing type of feelings, ESP or telepathic communication as well. And so when I stumbled across that book and got to reading about it, I'd never heard about a military operation known as Stargate. And although there are some skeptics involved, there are people who still believe that we're still doing that. And I don't doubt that at all. But for 2 years, for 2 to 3 years actually, I studied all the research I could get my hands on about that and developed the character of Seth Phoenix. It just continued to get bigger and bigger and bigger. What started out as, it's just, they're just doing they've got a lab in a wood frame house, hidden in the woods in the middle of Fort Meade. And then it became, the Air Force has got their own program going on called HARP, and it's located, within 50 miles of Fairbanks, Alaska. And so it just, and then of course there was we've been studying human cloning, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when I actually wrote the Phoenix series, I tried to do that as authentically as I possibly could when I set up the laboratories, and I have certain scenes in there are all real life locations. Some of them are real life scenarios, but they involve a fictional character who may be experiencing a real life phenomena that I studied. So that's an incredible series as well, if you're interested in that type of stuff.
Do you have many of the people that will come forward and share their story, but they want to remain anonymous?
All the time. In fact,
does that ever make you pause and worry that maybe it's not true then?
Sometimes. I was really disappointed a couple of days ago because I do a lot of, in between working on projects and things, I do what they call on the haunted trail, which is, sometimes I have a blog and I'll write about the different places that we investigate and things. And some of them are not all book worthy events, or not necessarily that they're not book worthy, but there's not enough there to put into a book or to create into a book project, but it may go into my blog that I have on WordPress. So there is this real place. It's located right here in town. It has been, according to the previous owner of this residence, it's been haunted for 58 years, and it is haunted by the ghost of a French and Indian French-Indian War soldier. It's a French soldier. He's been seen. She's communicated with him. Members of her own family have communicated with him. And the owners of the home right now are experiencing some things, but they didn't want us to come out and take a look. And I work with another clairvoyant that I sometimes take with me whenever I'm needing to use small handheld equipment. I don't carry a lot of cameras and things depending on the situation because it's cumbersome, to travel with that. But we do, she and I both are very, very gifted clairvoyants, and a lot of times I can walk in and I can make contact immediately. It just depends. And I can tell you things that they're saying. I can see them. It's as clear as day. So that's incredible. But then again, there's times when, nobody wants to talk, and that's always disappointing.
Right. And trying to get that story from them, to share. Is there times too that when you start to unveil part of the story, you realize that it's very, sensitive in nature? Do you feel compelled to change maybe the way a murder took place or the way a story unfolded, not necessarily to protect the innocent, but to kind of protect the reader from the real, maybe ugly side of what you were writing about?
Sometimes that might be a good idea to do that. And there's a way to still present it as authentically as you can. But as a writer, you dress it up. I've always tell people, look, I'm not a horror writer. That I am not that. I don't go for the horror of the blood and the guts and that kind of thing. But I am a very suspenseful writer. There will be some element of that. There will be a few elements maybe of horror that you get from my writing, from my books. But most of the time, There's a way that you could do this, like you said, to kind of not present it so grotesque, or at the same time, if there's a sexual element to something that can be very disturbing, there's ways to do that so that it's not disrespectful even to the deceased. And to me, that's important.
We need to take a quick break. We've got more to cover with our guest. We'll talk about some of her experiences, some of her road trips, and her investigations into these hauntings. Plus, I want to talk about the new book and the story behind the Devil's Board. We'll do that when we return. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
Welcome back. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. My guest today is L. Syndey Fisher. She's an award-winning author and the Amazon #1 best-selling author of The Haunting of Natalie Bradford, The Devil's Board, and The Haunted series. Inspired by such authors as Stephen King and Agatha Christie, her love affair with reading and writing began at a very early age, and this insatiable desire for knowledge launched a curiosity into the world of the supernatural and unexplained that has spanned a lifetime. Syndey has a BA in English from the University of Mississippi and a master's in education from the University of Missouri. She is the proud mom of 2 teenagers and a golden retriever mix. She's here with us tonight as we're going to talk a little bit about her new book, which is out and available, called The Devil's Board. And again, you can get that by going to darknessradio.com and click on the Killer Deals link. You also live in what you believe to be a haunted home. Is that right now?
Yes, I live on a haunted landscape. We'll say that. It was what was once an Indian village. In fact, at 2 different times, and I had no idea until I moved here. You would think that someone like me would research the land before I moved in, right? Oh, no, I did not do the smart thing. I was thinking, well, surely this is, I've not ever heard anything about the west side of town being, so here I go, and I find out after I start experiencing some strange noises and things like that. During the 1640s, the Chickasaw Indians, which were the Indians that covered all of this land here. This was like their home, their main. They dominated Lee County and North Mississippi, and they lived here during the 1640s. And this particular area where my subdivision and family live here, and then again in the mid 1700s. So, and then there was also the French Indian War, Battle of Acquia, that happened near here. So, and the Battle of Tupelo, Civil War battle. So lots of things, and I just landed right in the middle of all of it. But lately it has calmed down. I'm very thankful for that, because, you get much better rest when there's not a ghost jiggling the door handle or knocking on the door wanting in.
Well, now talk to us. Again, your books are based on real experiences, and I happened to be in college in 1988, and this is based on an American college campus back in 87 when 3 students began playing seemingly innocent game of Ouija board. What happened, and how did this story get your attention?
Well, I also was a student, and I did witness some of the events in this book. What happened was the way I, of course, became involved in it. I was on the campus and actually lived in one of the dorms where Stephanie and Amber Simmons and Josie and Rachel all lived when this Ouija board thing started getting cranked up, and they played the Ouija board for a little while. It always starts out as just a fun game. Always does. Until something really strange happens, or someone gets really, really scared, or the board decides to vibrate in midair. And
it's just like spin the bottle. It always starts off fun and games, and then there's yelling and screaming and people terrified.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that'll kind of do it for you. And they decide that maybe we shouldn't play this anymore.
Right.
but not with Amber. Amber, it starts out as just a game. You know, this is their first year in college, and everything is new, and it's fun times. And so they get involved in this, and it becomes becomes an activity that it spreads. You know, it spreads like wildfire to the point that you have 30 to 40 people now meeting and talking about what's going on, and how that Amber Simmons and Stephanie and Josie have contacted the spirit of someone who claims to have killed themselves on campus. And, you know, and this spirit, you know, he's not the only time that this has happened, you know, but spirits, a lot of times when you're playing Ouija board, they present themselves as a friendly, nice ghost of someone that once walked the earth, and they have a message to deliver for you, or something like that. But that is not always the case. And the thing about the Ouija board is that you have to know that when you're playing this, you don't know who you're contacting. It could be the ghost of someone that once lived on Earth, but more times than not, I'm inclined to believe that it is sinister spirits, or possibly an entity that has never taken the form of a human being, ever. But they present themselves as a friendly, benign, you know, spirit there to help you. And that's where it can get really scary and frightening, and sometimes deadly, because they tell you to do things. And this is kind of what the Devil's Board is about. These kids' experiences, and I call them kids because, of course, I've been around a while. So, but these
the type of things that they had happen that would unnerve them. I mean, you do have to understand there is some of it is a psychology and mindset of the person. But what made you believe that some of this was truly supernatural?
Well, it was truly supernatural whenever they started using this thing, and then they, Josie and Rachel started experiencing things in their own dorm room. It actually, in real life, they were all in the same dorm together, and the names are changed in this book to protect the living. But during the time in real life when this was going on, their rooms were like right next to each other. And they were playing with this Ouija board. They were calling up the spirit. And so when you're laying in bed and you're watching the clothes hangers swinging back and forth, or you're seeing an apparition move past you while you're washing your face, that is, and there's no reason for it other than Amber Simmons has been playing the Ouija board and all of these other things have been going on. You're naturally going to tie it in with that and what's happening. Not to mention that her friends started to see a personality change in her. She became so involved in, and possessed, if you will, if you use that word, possessed with wanting to, with this board and wanting to be, talking to the ghost of Ryan Banks constantly, that she got to a point to where she wasn't even using two people to do it. She would go in her room and sit down with her legs crossed and position the board on top of her legs there and play the board by herself. She'd turn the lights out. She would have just a candle burning there, and she would play this board by herself. And there was even times when the board would, move by itself. It would move off of her legs. There's a scene in the story where she actually, the board slings across the room into the door. Now, that did scare her that one time, but it didn't scare this person enough to where she realized that she's messing with something that maybe she shouldn't be. She needs to stop. It started planting thoughts in her head and actually telling her that the ghost actually started telling her, and by the way, I did change the name of the ghost in the book. The real ghost name I did not list in the book or did not reveal, simply because that particular spirit claimed that they committed suicide by shooting themselves in the head at one of the dormitories there on campus. So they claim to be a former student who got his heart broken. And he just decided after a while of talking and stuff that he was absolutely going to get revenge. And if he had to use somebody in order to do that, that's what he would do. So he started, telling them to kill people. It was amazing. It was absolutely the scariest thing I've ever encountered.
Do you find too, when you're looking into these stories and you start researching them, does paranormal activity start to pick up around you?
I will tell you that I wonder that myself. I have wondered, is this something that I'm bringing to me? But I will tell you that I think that my senses are heightened whenever I'm investigating something like that. Yes. I would have to agree with that I think that if nothing else, it opens you up to certain things when you're doing investigations or when you're around it. I just think it makes you more aware sometimes. Definitely. I'd definitely agree with that.
And looking at the Ouija board, obviously you're not a fan of it or the contact that comes through it. Are there people that you believe that when they're using this Ouija board that they're influencing themselves to maybe do evil in the name of whatever spirit is coming through the board?
I think that they could be influencing themselves, but I think that other spirit, of course, is, is the activist as far as that's concerned, or is the catalyst for what is to happen. The bad thing, I do think that it's manipulating the person that's using the board. I think it gets into your psyche, and they become just absolutely obsessed with it. It could be a very bad thing. There are some people, though, that tell me that, this can be a great tool. If you use the Ouija board right, it can be a great tool. The only problem that I have with that is that I haven't found those types of stories. I have not heard those type of case studies where using the Ouija board to contact the afterlife or spirits from the afterlife have actually enhanced someone's life in some way or brought about some type of positive change. I've not encountered those type of stories. The majority of the stories that I have encountered through my own Ouija research over the years, in particular this one that involved these students on a college campus, it ends up being something that is negative. And so I've always cautioned people who ask me, do you think that, we can play the Ouija board and just have a little fun with it? You hate to tell someone, no, you should not buy that Parker Brothers board that is for sale at Target or wherever. I tell everybody, look, if you're asking me, do I have that in my home? The answer is no, I do not. I do not have that in my home, and I do not play it, and I do not have it around for my own teenagers. And they've never even seen one that I'm aware of. So that is me. That is me telling you the way I feel about it, especially based on my own research and my own experiences with it. And I was there the night in the scene in the Devil's Board where Rachel and Nate are at the Performing Arts Center, and they are playing with this Ouija board. And you're going to come to a scene in this book. It's about, I'm trying to remember which chapter it is in, but it's about midways of the book where they are actually involved in this, playing the Ouija board. And there's about 30 or 40 people standing around. I mean, it was crowded that evening. It was probably it was getting dark, so it was in the fall. they were playing the Ouija board, and I'm telling you, that guy went into a trance unlike anything I've ever seen. He wasn't even moving. And what happened right then, I was there. I saw it with my own eyes, and that did it for me. I didn't need to be made a believer anymore. That did it. So I don't want to give away too much about the book and tell you about the scene. You'll have to read that particular part. But I will tell you that Amber Simmons was very, very much under the impression or whatever, she was being manipulated by the ghost of Ron Banks, the spirit of Ron Banks, who, in my opinion, I don't think that he ever walked the earth in human form. I think that he definitely was a negative entity that took on human characteristics, and he had only one objective, only one intention, and that was to cause havoc and to get her to do his bidding. And it almost worked.
Syndey, do you ever find yourself, are you easily scared by the paranormal at this point in your life, or are you so comfortable with it doesn't really unnerve you anymore?
I won't say that I'm so comfortable that it doesn't unnerve me, but I will say that I'm definitely not one of those people that has to be convinced anymore that there is an afterlife or that ghosts really do exist, because, I'm way past that. So whenever someone notifies me or comes to me and says, I really would like you to check this out, or, maybe you might be interested in this for a particular book project or whatever. People say my house is haunted and all of these different things that they give you their experiences. And I think that it's a healthy way to always be a skeptic. Yes, you should approach things as a skeptic. But once you get there and you get the information that you need in order to make an educated decision or, analysis of what actually is really going on. Is it an electrical problem in the house that's causing electromagnetic fields and strange things to go on? Or have you found out the history of the location? And, yes, there's enough history there of it. There was a death there or a murder or whatever the case may be that might actually explain why that the ghost is still there, those type things. So I always kind of approach something. If someone says, there's a haunting here, I don't tell them, oh, no, there's no haunting. I don't approach it from that aspect as the immediate skeptic going in. What I try to find out is, why is it happening? If a place is haunted by the spirit of someone who has once lived there, there's always a reason. It may be because there's unfinished business, of course, or, they died a horrific death, or they want some sort of vindication. So I try to find out those things of what's going on. And at the same time, there may be times where I go into a place, and there have been, where there's nothing, I have no reason to believe necessarily that there is an intelligent haunting there. But at the same time, that person's experiences are no less real just because I didn't experience anything while I was there. And so I try to always be very objective about what I am doing, but at the same time, I let people know, look, I'm on your side and I am a believer, and I want to find out why these things are happening to you. So I do look at it like that, and I do always ask for the history of a location, and if they don't have a lot of it, then I may get into studying it and that kind of thing, and it's really interesting how things pop up.
Now, I know you hit the road to look into these places and hear about this. How do you gauge your investigations? Do you do overnight, full-on investigations? Is it more, going in for a brief period to sense and see what you can pick up and then relying on the stories of others? Explain to the listeners how you go about that.
That's a great question. Actually, we have gotten into some overnight stays. I had mentioned earlier that I do work with another clairvoyant. She's very, very gifted. She and I both have very strong gifts, and it's great whenever you can work with someone that you trust who will validate your feelings and what you're finding as well. We do stay overnight sometimes. The most recent place that we visited was in February. We stayed at a place called the Lincoln House. It's located in Columbus, Mississippi, which was a Civil War antebellum town. There are about to be doing their annual pilgrimage where you can actually tour all these beautiful antebellum homes, and it is a very haunted city. It's a gorgeous city. But we went into the Lincoln House, which was built around 1838, I believe, so it's pre-Civil War. It has an enormous history in that home. There has been multiple different sightings and all types of paranormal experiences that have happened to people who have stayed at this, what was once a bed and breakfast, but the last couple of years it had not been used as a bed and breakfast. But I did get permission from the owner to bring some folks with me, and we stayed down in the basement. And I will tell you that just that one night, it was absolutely incredible, the amount of activity that we were able to record and get. And I would stay there again in a heartbeat. All of it seemed to be very benign. There was not any bad feeling at all. All of this energy is energy, of course, that it's been all of the house has been in the same family for, 150 some odd years. And so the ghosts that are there are people that have once lived there. One of them mainly was Lonnie Lincoln, and then another lady that had lived also in the house. Her apparition was seen. So it just was incredible. And there was children also that were detected. There's been at least 6 or 7 people who have died in the home.
Now, when you say detected, explain that to me. I mean, they've been physically seen, they've just been sensed, they've been heard. How do you consider detected?
All of those things. They have been physically seen. They have also been heard. They've been picked up using equipment, recorders, spirit boxes. Actually, the communication, it was amazing when I was down in the basement. Lonnie Lincoln was trying to actually communicate with us. And we told the owners when we got there, tell us a little bit just to get us going, but don't tell us a whole lot of information, because that's how we validate what we're doing here and whether or not this is real communication. And the room that this kept happening, it was amazing. In fact, I could see him as plain as day, but you got to remember that clairvoyants are able to do that. We did have one other lady who was with us that has different types of gifts to where she can sense the emotions of them. But anyway, clairsentience. And he was sitting in the recliner there in that room, and we could smell him. We kept smelling smoke, kept smelling a cigar. So we reported all of these things to the owner of the home later, an hour or so later after we had all this communication. And we were using a spirit box. One of the investigators was using a spirit box to communicate. And we asked, this room, we kept smelling smoke from this room and all these things. And they said that his name was Lonnie Lincoln. And I just could not believe it. It's just so incredible whenever you get verification. And the owner of the home said, well, Lonnie Lincoln, actually, the room that you're talking about was his office, and he smoked in there all the time. And his name was Lonnie Lincoln, and he was a local attorney. And, it was just amazing. So, to answer your question, that's what happened. You see them, you hear them. As far as seeing them physically, there was a man who actually had reported that he had seen the ghost of the apparition of the woman that was there, and I'm trying to remember her name, and it has left my mind for a moment. But she actually lived in the home, and he saw the full-bodied apparition of her walking across the yard, actually. And then the owners, Mrs. Carradine, Brenda Carradine, who lived in the Lincoln home as well, she saw the apparition move from the parlor to the foyer. And it was just the most incredible thing. And then the next morning while we were having breakfast there in the dining hall, it was so wonderful to watch they said that this is the first time this has ever happened. That's never happened. The cabinet doors to the china cabinet were coming open. right there while we were sitting there, it just opened itself and just opened a little bit as if somebody was getting a cup out of the cupboard there. And, I just looked and I was like, that is just so cool. It didn't scare me at all. Now, if it starts yanking the tablecloth off the table, it's time to get out.
Have you ever been in a place or in a situation where you felt, maybe I'm in over my head here. Maybe there is something and I should just leave this alone?
Oh, yes. And that happened to me last June, when I was researching the material for Volume 2 in the Haunted series. Volume 2 involves what we used to be called the wilderness back during the day when, 150 to 200 years ago, when the Chickasaws were in this land and there was very few Europeans that had settled here. I was actually over about 20 to 30 miles from here, and I was investigating a property that someone had contacted me about. Now, I will tell you that TAPS of Alabama did do a formal investigation of this property, and they did send me the report. So I have it here, and they sent me the audio that they got in the basement area. And there is no doubt in my mind that there is multiple hauntings there. They are intelligent, but they are not the spirits of people that have once lived. They are absolutely malevolent. And that particular property has quite a history of negative things that have happened to begin with, one being a murder that happened on the property. The second was a suicide within 6 months of the man moving into the place. It totally destroyed this family during the 6 months that they lived there. The owner of the property contacted me after I had been over. A family friend had taken me to the property, and the house is abandoned now. There's nobody there, nobody living there. And a friend of the family had told me, if you want to walk around and just take some pictures and just get a feel and that kind of thing. So that's what we did. I went up and looked inside. The minute I pulled up, I mean the minute, and I walked around and looked at it, I felt just icky all over, just not good, just as if I needed to hurry up and get this over with and get out of there. I even felt uncomfortable to the point that I was afraid whatever this was would follow me. So at one point, I was walking around the front porch of this place. It looks like a big, huge lake house. And I did look inside the windows in the home. Like I said, I was only there for about 10 or 15 minutes. I did see an apparition of a woman who was peering out the side light of the front door, the side lights on front doors. Mm-hmm. And she looked very old, had very large eyes, and was humpback. And she was staring out, and then I did know, for the first time ever, and I will tell you, in all these many years that I have done paranormal research, I've never seen a shadow person. I've never witnessed a shadow, the black shadow ghost that you hear people talk about, the shadow people. I've never seen that. The only thing that I have ever seen are full-bodied apparitions where it looks like a person that you can see straight through. I have witnessed those, but I've never encountered the shadow people. I encountered it that day, and it absolutely stalked us. It circled the property, and it was massive. It was very, very tall. It had to be, if I'm going to say the height of this thing, 8 feet, 7 to 8 feet. I mean, but I'm 5'3", so everybody's tall to me. And everything is tall, but that's 5'3", short people. But this particular, ghost shadow thing, it moved very quickly, and it moved around the property as if it was watching us. And I caught it out of just the corner of my eye, and I thought, no, I'm not really seeing that, So then I didn't say anything to the lady there that was with me, and my daughter was with me, my teenage daughter, and she had come along with me. And, it was in the middle of the day. I thought, what could possibly hurt? We're not going in. We're not, it's not going to be anything to scare my daughter. And so the lady who was the family friend of the family and who lived next door, she was there with me. But I didn't say anything to either one of them because I was thinking, maybe I didn't see what I thought I saw. But then it continued. And it got bigger, and it continued to move around, and then all of a sudden it shot straight up into a tree. And I watched it. I just started watching it. And I thought, I wonder if anybody else is seeing this. But still, I didn't want to say anything. And I felt so uncomfortable that at that moment, I just told the lady, I thanked her for meeting me there and for showing me around. And I told her I'd be in touch if I had any questions. And so I just got ready to go. And I just told my daughter, get in the car, let's go. And we got out of there at that moment. A few hours later, the owner of the property who had abandoned the property and her husband had shot and killed himself there within 6 months of this family moving there. She contacted me and she asked me, she said, if I could take you back to the house and unlock the doors and let you go in, will you go in? And I told her, I said, absolutely not. And I said that for the first time, normally I would, I'm all psyched up for a good ghost hunt. Absolutely not. I said, ma'am. and she told me things. She validated. I said, I've witnessed something that I've never witnessed before ever in my paranormal ghost loving life. I've never seen a ghost figure, but I saw something. And I said, it was the strangest thing. And so we were actually messaging each other on Facebook Instant Messenger. And as I was typing this, at the same time, she was telling me, she was hitting enter, and it was popping up her message that she was telling me about her son who had encountered the ghost, the black ghost figure. And I just absolutely just sat there with, my mouth hanging open. And I was going, oh my God. This horrific murder that took place months before this family moved in, and they didn't even know about it until they had moved in. That energy was there. And then they move in, and she tells me that during the 6 months that her husband lived there, that he started having strange experiences and seeing things. And she told me that he, one day she said, what's wrong with you? You just seem so angry all the time. And he says, you know what? He says, if you knew the thoughts that were running through my mind, he said, you would be horrified. And I am not kidding you.
Yikes.
Yeah, I am not kidding you. The morning that this man committed suicide, that morning she told me at 10, and it still gives me chills to tell the story because I was right there at that basement. I mean, I was standing right there and seeing the very things that she hours later told me. There's no way she would have known. I did not tell the family member, the friend of the family. I kept it quiet. I did that on purpose. I kept it to myself, things that I was seeing. And then hours later, we're typing on the computer and this messenger, and it was just crazy. But the morning that this happened, that he killed himself, he went downstairs and cut the telephone wires to the house and hid her car keys. And she said, I'm going to tell you something. She said, that morning, every one of us, he intended for every one of us to die.
Ooh.
And she said, the reason that we did not die is because he could not find the extra shells that went to that shotgun. And that is exactly why those people got out of that house. He only had 2 shells left. He couldn't find them. And one of them went off and blew the side of the wall apart, and the other one took the left side of his face apart. Mm. And he did this in front of them, and it destroyed her life, destroyed her. And you can just imagine. And so the house still is abandoned. And of course, I've changed all the names in that story. That story is called, for anybody wanting to read that is called The Devil's Den on Purpose. And it is in Volume 2 of the Haunted series. It's available on Amazon, or you can go, of course, to my website is syndeyfisher.com. But that is unlike anything that I personally have ever encountered. And, just like I was telling you, Dave, I love a good ghost story. I'm not scared of a haunting per se, but what's at that property, that's something completely different. And I will say that I've not been back, even though, she wanted me to go back. And I think that she wanted to see if I could maybe help her make some sense of things. Mm-hmm. But I did talk to her for a good while and stayed in contact with her and told her, I said, and tried to, to help her some, to get better and that kind of thing. But it's been 2 or 3 years now since that all occurred. And the good news is that I think she's doing fine.
Well, that's good. At least she got a reboot. Wow, that's chilling. You were giving me the willies as this was going on. And I have to tell you, now this is, I'm recording from my home studio, while I'm recovering. I'm trying not to. I've been very sick with an upper chest, respiratory issue, and, staying away from Tim. We're doing it remotely together, like we did for the Monday show. But, I'm working on my home studio. And as you and I are talking, there's no one else in this house. My TV set goes on. Okay, that's not a big deal. Maybe it's just a stray signal. But we have an interesting little remote that has a white dot that when you aim it at the screen, it'll start moving around on the screen. And this white dot started moving around on the screen and then clicked on one of the smart buttons and started to launch a program on my TV. There is nobody else in this room.
Wow.
And all the remotes are right in front of me. I reached over and I turned the TV off with the one remote and continued listening to your story when all of a sudden the TV popped back on and the white cursor started moving around my screen and then picked the same selection again and fired off. I had to turn the TV off again. So weird things are taking place in the Schrader household. So I love these kind of shows when it spills over. Syndey, we were talking, and that last story you shared, that was really kind of sent those shivers up and down the spine, especially when you're dealing with things like the possibility of a murder-suicide and then the ending of it being a suicide. In these cases, do you find when it's a suicide that, these places remain scarred by that, not necessarily haunted by the spirits, but scarred by the trauma of that death and the people that survived it?
I do. I do think that it remains scarred. For the family members for sure, and she ended up, of course, leaving the property and she's moved on and she's living her life elsewhere. Sometimes though, you have a suicide situation and that particular spirit, the ghost of that person has not moved on. It may be, and there's a belief that maybe that they've come to some realizations that maybe I shouldn't have done that. I've got some unfinished business, or I hate to see my family members grieving so hard and so bad because it's, something that they feel responsible for, of course. But that particular situation, I do not think that her husband is still there in spirit. I think maybe she felt like that, if she could get me to go back there and open the door and go in with her, that maybe I might feel that. I can tell you that I didn't sense that at all. And some of the things that she actually told me that this man was experiencing before he actually committed suicide, there's not a doubt in my mind that he was being absolutely tortured by a malevolent being. And what goes even crazier is that TAPS of Alabama actually picked up on some of this stuff, and I do have their report, and their conclusion was that the house the location is haunted. I will tell you that later, the lady whose husband has passed and who had committed suicide, she sent me a photograph that they had gotten a picture that her son had actually snapped, and in that picture is the face of what must be a demonic being. I've never seen anything like this, but I don't doubt it at all. And I did have the photo analyzed by a couple of people to make sure that it had not been photoshopped in any way. And that is the first time I will say that I have ever looked at the face of something that is sinister. And it looked like a rabid dog is what it looked like. It had its eyes and its snout, its mouth and stuff. It looked like an animal of some sort.
Do you think that it is something, I mean, especially kind of being around Native American properties and lands out there, do you think that this is something that would be considered like an elemental, or do you believe that it is truly of the demonic realm?
It could be an elemental. With everything that went on at that place, I tell you, I really just, this is just my opinion, I really feel that it was demonic. And I'm telling you that I could not get in my car quick enough that day. So, and I tried to be so cool and so, about it and not show that I had that urge to that flight, get the hell out of Dodge, if you will. I didn't want to scare the lady. She lived next door to this property. When I later told her some of the things that I was feeling, she was going, oh my God, I hope it doesn't travel. I said, you'll be fine. But I said, I don't think that I would go down there and hang out for any reason. At that property.
That seems like a place you just want to leave off the accounts altogether. That's being some of the more weird experiences that you've gone out there for. How about for your own world, your own life? Have you ever had just a really chilling experience that's made you think, you know what, maybe I need to start writing children's books about fuzzy bunnies instead of worrying about the supernatural?
I would love to write a children's book about a fuzzy bunny. The only thing is that I always come back to this because it just seems to be my thing. There's been a lot of experiences that I have experienced. I've lived in haunted houses, at least 2 or 3. There was a house that I lived in for a few years. Everything, didn't happen all at one time, but there was something that was sinister there. I think that there was a couple of spirits that were there. One of them, I think, was just a normal, intelligent haunting, that it was, the ghost of someone who had once lived. And then there was something else that I could not identify at all, but that I would wake up at night and would have the room. One night I woke up and I literally felt as if I was levitating. And the room was glowing this bright red. I had never experienced that before. I did not know what it meant, had no idea until afterwards when I started doing some research, and it scared me to death. We didn't stay there long. I mean, we actually lived there for a few years, but after that particular thing happened, we ended up selling the house and moving. On another note, there has been some really wonderful supernatural things that have happened to me. I have experienced an angelic encounter. I've had a near-death experience when I was about 15 years old. My car went off a bridge. It was on a little country farm road I was traveling on my way home. I had been babysitting a lady's children that I went to church with, and had never traveled on that road before, but so it was really, really dark, and on my way home, I had to go across this little country farm bridge that didn't have any side rails up, no warning signs, anything like that. And I came upon it. It was just a little country gravel road, and it was narrow anyway. And I came upon it suddenly, and the right side of my car just went off the side of that bridge, and I plummeted 30 to 40 feet below into the water with no time at all, hanging upside down with no time at all to take a breath or really to even know what's going on because you couldn't see. And it happened so fast, and I saw my whole life like on a little movie reel. I saw my time when I lived with my parents in the Boot Hills of Missouri, and I was 3 or 4 years old, and then it flashed by up until about the time, the age where I was, and then all of a sudden it was lights out, and I felt as if you've ever had this sensation of fainting. That's the only thing I know to compare it to. It was like a vacuum where I felt like I was literally being lifted out of my physical body. And when that happened, this enormous, there are no words to describe this, and you've probably heard this before when this is, I noticed that you talked recently with the doctor, the neurosurgeon who had this experience, and I've read his book. It's absolutely a great book.
Right, Dr. Eben Alexander. We ran that special episode last Wednesday while I was out sick.
Right. I have read his book. It's a phenomenal, great book. I always love to talk to the neurosurgeons and people who are the ones who say all of this is just no, it can't possibly be happening to you, but it is, but it really is. And this is what I tell people: once you ever have a paranormal experience, you will be transformed. But during my time, just like everyone else who probably has had an NDE, you go into this massive. I saw the same massive light. I had, there's not a word to describe that love. There just isn't. If you are a parent, that's close. It is an unconditional love. It's a love that I remember feeling when I had my daughter, my firstborn child, and when they placed her in my arms. It's overwhelming. That's the type of feeling that I had when I was in the light, and it was so beautiful. And when you get there and you're standing there, and there was this, this voice, it was a male voice. I do remember that said, because I was a little bit confused, and I was not wearing the clothes that I was wearing in the car crash. It was like I was either bathed completely by this light and my nakedness was, not visible, or I had on maybe a white robe, but everything was so bright. And he said to me, just follow the light. Just follow the light. And it was this big, huge tunnel, but it was all lit up. And I knew that there were people that were there waiting on me, and that I was walking into something that was a paradise unlike anything that you'd ever experienced on earth. And then all of a sudden I turned around and I looked back down at my car upside down in the creek. And I said, what about my mom and my dad and my brother? I'm leaving them behind. And I had that one moment of sorrow for my mom especially. I felt sorrow. I felt the way she would feel finding me in that creek. And within a split second, I'm not kidding, it was you can't explain this stuff. I felt I was back in my body. And I felt my limbs were free. And the water, somehow or another, I had washed out. We think now, looking back on that situation, that all the windows in the car were busted out. We think that my body floated out a passenger side window. And at that moment, when I felt myself back in my body and like awake, physically in the here and now, I opened my eyes and I looked up, and the moon was shining so bright on the water that I was able to see it. And I started trying to I was about to die. I was just, if you've ever been underneath the water and you can't get your breath and you're trying to get to the top of the water, you know what
horrible.
that feels.
Yeah, horrible.
Yes, it is. So that was that feeling. And oh my goodness, I was just about to open my mouth because I couldn't stand it anymore. And I reached the top of the water, and I, bust forth out of the water and was gasping and coughing and everything. And I looked around, and then, of course, the tears start crying. You start crying because you're going, oh, my God. And you're looking up, and the moon is so bright that literally at that moment I thought, I'm dead, and I don't really know it. I am a ghost. What has just happened? And so I make my way over to this bank, which is 30 to 40 feet high. There are no convenient, it would have been really convenient if there had been some tree limbs or some roots that I could grab onto to pull myself up. And I'm about 5'3", weighed about 120 pounds. So there was nothing. So I took my fingers, and Mississippi, we have this red clay here. Mm-hmm. And it's so muddy and gross. But I took my fingers and I buried them into the side of that red clay bank, and I would pull, and my fingernails were ripping. My fingernails were bleeding. Unbelievable. I managed to get up that bank, though, and when I got up the bank, I laid out in this field, which looked like a soybean maybe field or wheat. I think it was soybeans. And I laid there for just a minute, and for about 10 minutes, and my right arm was just aching horribly by then, and my legs. But I didn't know what had been injured. But I really thought that possibly my arm was completely detached from my body somehow. It was aching so bad. In a few minutes, I got up and I walked about 1.5 miles back to her house, the lady's house. These coyotes barking in the distance, and I said, I have survived this wreck. If I don't get eaten by coyotes, I'll be okay. So I get up to her porch, and she knock on the door, and she comes to the door, and she looks at me and, of course, screams because I didn't know what I looked like, but I was covered in blood all over my face where I had hit the windshield and everything had shattered. And I kept asking her for a mirror. This is where this is really freaky about this story, because remember, I had the near-death experience, but I don't know how long that I was under the water. And so she wouldn't give me a mirror. She said, no, you don't need to see. You don't want a mirror. I said, I really want a mirror. There's something in my mouth. I need a mirror. Finally, she brought me a little handheld mirror while she was calling my parents. This happened when I was about 15. And she gave it to me, and inside my bottom lip, I pulled out some nasty, dirty leaves that were in the debris in the creek, and then I pulled out a leech. So that was really nice and appetizing.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, but when I get to the hospital, fast forward, I get to the hospital, no broken bones or anything, but, my parents are absolutely just freaking out because they go and, the next morning they have to pull this car out of the river. And I think I sent you a picture of this car.
Yes.
I sent you a picture. And you can see if you look at that car, look at it close where those bucket seats, it was an Oldsmobile Cutlass, and those bucket seats, the headrest is bent over from the roof caving in. So you can see that there wasn't a lot of room for a person in that car. And when that car hit the embankment and it fell into that water. By the way, the creek was only about 5 foot deep of water, 5 feet deep, but I was upside down, suspended upside down. I did not have my seatbelt on. If I'd had my seatbelt on, I would not be telling you this story today. Not having the seatbelt on in this scenario saved my life because my body was able to wash out the passenger window. But when the car hit the embankment, it hit so hard that the odometer rolled back 10,000 miles.
Wow.
And there were welts that were on my thighs that were about 10 inches long on each thigh where I had slammed against the bottom of that steering wheel, hanging upside down. Later, when I got home, after my time at the emergency room and all that, I had French braided my hair. And I had French braided my hair and had it away from I had long hair, still have long hair. But I had French braided my hair then. And when I was taking the French braid out of trying to clean myself up and get ready to lay down and take medicine or anything to get so that things would stop hurting, glass, unbelievable handfuls of glass fell out of my French braid, of my hair, all in the floor. So it was wild. That was, to say that was a transforming experience is an understatement. But I will tell you that from that time on is when I really started experiencing a lot of clairvoyant heightened sensitivities. So then that's part 2 of my story, where I actually, the first part of my story seemed to be my first encounter with the ghost of Liz Bradford at Lindenwood. And then the second part of my story is what in the world happened to me after that near-death experience. And now I'm all of a sudden have all these heightened sensitivities to things and can walk into a location. And if there is any type of energy there, sometimes I can not only pick up on it, but I can communicate and I can tell you what they're wearing, what they look like, what their thoughts are. It's amazing. And it took a long time to embrace that and not be afraid of it, but that's kind of where I am at this point. And you can understand now why I write these stories and go looking for the real true stuff.
I do. Syndey, thank you so much for sharing your story. And boy, looking at the picture of that car, there is nothing left of the driver's side. I mean, that roof is caved in to a point where it's almost completely flat. It's remarkable that you survived this, and I'm glad that you did so that you could be here to share your story and the great stories that you have today. We'll put up a link again. You can go to darknessradio.com, click on the Killer Deals link, and there you'll be able to find a link to her newest book. Syndey Fisher, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I had a wonderful time, Dave.
It's been a pleasure. We'll be back with you again on Friday with another brand new edition of the best in paranormal talk radio. And we're joined by the one and only Mark Anthony and the ghost of Flight 401 here on Beyond the Darkness.